So this started out as a TikTok, but then it got too long. So I'm just going to do a video and maybe put it on YouTube. That being said, this is a story time / rant about my heritage and appropriation that some claim, and the gatekeeping that some people do that isn't even theirs to gatekeep, and the idea that you have to look some sort of way to be who you are, right? And growing up, I grew up knowing that my grandmother, my mom's mom, was Native American. She, in her home, there was Native American everything, and I knew that her father specifically was Micmac. He had come down from Nova Scotia on a boat. He was an accomplished seaman, and as that is the culture of Micmacs. They are sea water peoples, and so I grew up knowing that. And when I was in college, I took history classes. I was a history major, and I did take the history of boat building, and one of the things in there I was so delighted was an excerpt on the Micmacs and how they invented skin boats, which were basically kayaks or canoes made from the skins of animals. So they were watertight and very brilliantly designed. And so regardless, anyway, there's that. Then I never knew my grandfather, my mom's dad's heritage, because he had left my grandmother when my mom was a young child, and so she never had any interest in knowing anything about him. However, her older brother, my older uncle, who had really embraced Native American heritage, I mean, he was all out, and he had moved to far northern New York, and he had done a lot of genealogy, and he wanted to know our background, because I think when you have when it's in your blood, you just can feel it. You feel it. There's a pull towards the core of your soul, I think. And so he did a lot of research, and he found out that my mom's dad was actually Micmac as well. He was Micmac from Aroostook, northern Maine. So it was just ironic that both of my mom's parents were Micmac. And then we can get into the whole debate on do we call people indigenous? Do we call them Native American? Definitely not Indian. We've established that, right? I think for clarification's sake, it's the easiest to say Native American, because even though we were here before America, when you say indigenous peoples, I feel that indigenous peoples can mean people from other places. I mean, it's kind of like a given when you're speaking about the people from the Americas being indigenous, but when you call them just simply indigenous, I think it really is a broad term, because you can be indigenous from Australia, you can be indigenous from New Zealand, you can be indigenous from Africa. So I don't know. I guess that's a little tweaking that has to go on in my head. For clarification's sake, I tend to say Native American. Now, I know that there are a lot of gatekeepers on this issue that are both indigenous peoples and non-indigenous peoples. And really, I think the ones that bother me so much are the people that have no claim to being indigenous or Native American, and yet they gatekeep this term, the terminology, and they're constantly claiming cultural appropriation, and I just don't see that as much with the people themselves as I do with the people that are on the outside of the people themselves. Okay, now there's part of that rant. Growing up, of course, now going back to that, I knew that I was Micmac, and I was always kind of hesitant to say it out loud too much because of the blonde hair and blue eyes. I felt like people would be like, "Oh, you're full of shit. You know, how can you be Native American if you're blonde hair and blue eyes," right? So it was something that I just kind of knew I was and felt in my heart, and yet kind of just didn't say much about, until I was always drawn to going to the powwows, because I just really identify with the culture there. I feel at home among Native, Indigenous people. I feel at home among them, and so I hate them. It's whatever. When I was very young, my early 20s, I went to one of the powwows, and for the first time ever, I found a booth of the people that were selling things, and they were Micmacs, and I was over the moon delighted. I couldn't believe, oh my gosh, there are other Micmacs, and so I struck up a conversation. It was an older man and an older woman. They were gray haired, so you couldn't tell what their actual hair color was. The man did have lighter eyes, and I was just really excited. So I said, you're not gonna believe this, but I'm Micmac as well. My mom's parents were both Micmac. The old man got this big smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye, and he said, "Of course you are. You look just like my granddaughter." And he had that northern, that Canadian accent or whatever. And I was stunned, and I said, "I look like your granddaughter?" And he said, "Yeah, you look just like my granddaughter." And then he went on to explain how there are light-skinned, light-haired, light-eyed indigenous Americans or indigenous peoples in particularly that area. And it goes back to the Viking times, when the explorers, the Scandinavian explorers, came over, and despite being, everybody thinking that Vikings were plunderers and rapists and everything else, they were other than that as well. They were searching for lands to live on, and their paganism and the Native American spirituality was very similar. The connection to the earth, and to, of course, they had different gods, but their belief in their god system was very similar. Different names, of course, but very similar cultural system. So they had respect for each other. They weren't killing and raping each other. They were intermarrying. They liked each other. And so it was an actual thing, which really made sense to me, and I really, really thought that was cool. Now, go back to the fact that my father didn't really care much about his ancestry. My father's family had come to this country in the 1600s. He claimed from Germany. Our last name is Simons. I think that name has been a bit switched throughout history. I can look back and find different spellings of it with a D at the end of it, or two M's, but rarely two M's. So there's just been a lot of different variations. Now, I couldn't really trace us back to Germany, but when I did our DNA, it lit up Scandinavian, and I really have no other areas except for Scandinavian and Scottish, which would be my mom's grandmother. So my great grandmother on my mom's side, the one that married the Micmac, my Micmac grandfather. So she was Irish, she thought. She's Scottish. So the three big things, and there are really not much else in my DNA, is Native American, Native peoples to the northern Maine and Nova Scotia area, Scottish, and Scandinavian. And which really does explain my blonde hair, blue eyes. I have to make a note, I am the only blonde hair, blue-eyed person aside from one of my uncles in our family. Everybody else is dark-haired and dark eyes. So my dad had hazel eyes, but other than that, also very dark hair, even though he was a Scandinavian dude. So anyway, it was all really fascinating to me, and I feel a very strong pull. Even though I was brought up Christian, I was brought up in the Catholic Church, because when my grandfather married my grandmother, my great-grandfather married my great-grandmother, he did convert to Catholicism just to marry her. And that was her, do or die. She had to have her family be Catholic. So, we went from that to Catholicism. My dad's family was all over the map. I think he was originally born Episcopalian, and then he went to Methodist. And my grandmother, his mom, she just kind of went all over the place. She did expose them to different religions throughout time. So I definitely was brought up in Christian household, primarily Catholic with the secondary Christianity. I never felt super, super connected. I do love Mary, I have to say, and I think that I relate to her on a motherly basis. I think just because she was the mother of Jesus. So I don't really buy into the whole Jesus as God thing, and that's a whole other debate. I kind of do believe that Jesus did exist as a prophet, more like the Jewish religion acknowledges. I don't even know anything about the Jewish religion really at all, except for I have respect for anybody that has any faith, of whatever their faith is, or spirituality, or anything else. So that now we go back to, I do feel very, very strongly about my attachment to paganism and my attachment to the Native American spirituality. And I feel, regardless of anybody's gatekeeping on cultural appropriation or terminology or whatever, I feel that I have a right to claim my connection to both of those ideologies and heritages, right? And so now this leads me into my rant, because on all of my social media, I have, I call myself a mermaid hippie, witch, Native American, Scottish, Viking. You can fuck off if you don't like it. It's what I identify with. It's me. And so there was somebody on, I think it was on Instagram recently, and he boasted that he was Scottish and Native American. And I was so excited because I'm like, oh my God, hey, that's somebody with a very similar genealogy to me. So I was like, hey, me too. And there was a gatekeeper that came on and really ripped me a new one and said that I had no right to claim any sort of affinity to being a Viking because my blonde hair and blue eyes and the what did he call it? I blocked him, so I can't remember. But basically, that me waving my Viking my Viking belief system was the same as I might as well just call myself a white supremacist. And I am so fucking offended at that because just because a few idiots that stormed the Capitol, were wearing what they interpreted to be Viking costumes doesn't mean that they identify or are Viking at all. And and then there's people that are like, oh, Vikings don't exist anymore. Viking was a career. Oh, come on, just fuck off. If you actually go anywhere in Scandinavia, you're gonna see Viking shit everywhere. Viking lore is very alive and real and exists. There are Viking museums and Viking ships, and there's a strong connection to the Vikings. Regardless of what you believe, there is a strong connection to it. And they are very Christian in that region. However, there are a lot of people that are still very connected to pagan roots. And I've been there, I know this. My husband was Danish. I know my children live in Denmark. I've been there. And my husband, long before any of this bullshit, before even 9/11, got a tattoo with Viking runes. So, it is not just because these assholes, white supremacists, I don't even know why they've decided to take over the idea of being Vikings. They're not Vikings. They are not Vikings. They might like the idea of being raiders or some sort, but there's so much more to paganism than being raiders, and there's just more to that. And I identify with that. I love paganism, and I love Native American lore, and I just don't think that it's right that people crawl out of the woodwork to tell you what you can and can't be based on what you look like. And I had this conversation at the powwow again last summer when I was speaking with some of our local indigenous peoples here on Long Island. I was speaking with I don't believe it was somebody who was from the Narragansett tribe, I believe. So still eastern United States area, but not far east, So we were talking about it, and I was talking with actually a few of them, and they said, I told them how I do get a little bit insecure about my looks when it comes to my heritage, because I don't want to be diminished in my beliefs and in my heritage. And this man, one of the people from our indigenous lands, said to me, I don't care what you look like, you are my blood. We are all blood. We are all brothers and sisters. And it doesn't matter what you look like. He said, I myself am darker skinned because I had some African heritage mixed in with my blood as well. So, you know, his full claim was to being indigenous. However, he also did have African American or African heritage as well. And so, of course, he's super dark, I'm super light, and yet we are blood. And that's that's the gist of it. So when armchair quarterbacks, or whatever you want to call them, come on social media and attack me for basically just because of what I look like, and say that I cannot possibly claim to be Native American and I'm ridiculous because I'm blonde hair and blue eyes, I say fuck you. And if you're gonna gatekeep in that way, it's you're a total prejudice asshole. And by prejudice, I mean prejudged. You're looking at me and you are deciding what you think I am purely based on what you think I look like and what you think I should look like. And so, yeah, I guess rant over. These are little things that are personal to me and make me reflect, and I want to just get it out there. So have a very wonderful day, friends. I also am very, very connected to the universe, and I will straight up tell you I'm a witch. So you can call me crazy all you want, I don't give a shit. This cup, by the way, I got at the powwow, so fuck off. Have a great day.